On December 15th, 2004, Virginia Tech coach Frank Beamer was on his way to meet up with the top-ranked high school football player in Virginia, Victor Macho Harris, for a recruiting visit. But when Beamer arrived at the kid's house, he noticed that smoke was coming out of the top. Beamer and his assistant quickly ran inside to help put out the fire, and then rushed Macho Harris and his family to the hospital. Ridiculously enough, they had to have someone else drive the car because NCAA rules would not allow Beamer or his assistant to drive the recruit anywhere. But anyways, after they arrived at the hospital, it was found that Macho Harris had been severely burned while trying to put out the grease fire in the kitchen. After being treated for third-degree burns, Coach Beamer, who had stayed at the hospital to make sure everything was okay, told Harris that coincidentally, when he was a young boy, he was severely burned in a grease fire himself. The burns to his face, shoulders, and chest were so severe that he had to have over 24 surgeries to repair the damages. Because of timing and this shared experience, Macho Harris and Frank Beamer immediately bonded. 10 days later, on Christmas Day, Macho Harris's mother passed away from a brain aneurysm. It was an absolute tragedy, and the only coach who called Harris to console him was Frank Beamer. Macho Harris ended up committing to Virginia Tech, and he became one of their pivotal players over the following years.
140 yards through the air. This one is picked off. Macho Harris. Oh, he's feeling macho now. 70 yards.
In today's video, we will be going over some of the most insane college football recruiting stories ever. But before we get into it, this video is sponsored by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a company that I've been working with for a long time, and they gather tickets from all across the web and put them into one area, making buying simple. They have everything from football, baseball, basketball, concerts, festivals, or more. And with so many amazing concerts and festivals happening right now, you're not going to want to miss out. I'm talking The Weeknd, Justin Bieber, Tyler the Creator, John Mayer, Bad Bunny, and so much more. SeatGeek rates every ticket from 0 to 10 to make sure that you're getting a good deal, with green meaning good and red meaning bad. And for first-time buyers, use code KTO at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. Make sure to click the link in the description to download the app. Now, returning to the video and keeping the focus on recruits picking schools, there have been some other crazy reasons why kids end up committing to one school or another. T.Y. Hilton was torn between two teams, West Virginia and FIU. Perhaps due to not knowing how to decide, Hilton went with an unusual method. He placed two hats onto his bed, and then he sat his infant son on the bed too. And whichever hat the little infant chose was where T.Y. Hilton was going to commit. Apparently, Eugene Jr., his infant son, chose the FIU hat 6 consecutive times. So that's where he ended up going. Could you imagine being the West Virginia coach and getting word that this recruit won't be attending your school because their baby chose the other hat? Another wild recruiting decision was when Deshaun Jackson was deciding between USC and Cal. Jackson was planning on attending USC, which is something that he had hinted at to the team's coaches. But when Jackson woke up on National Signing Day, he believed that the secret of him playing for USC had got around from the coaches, which caused him to change his mind and commit to Cal. This was possibly out of spite. But that's not as crazy as when a kid named Kevin Hart committed to Cal. On the surface, his commitment ceremony was pretty standard. There were over 900 people who attended, filling up the high school gym to witness this kid making his decision. Only one problem. Neither of the schools that he was choosing between had even offered him scholarships. In fact, they weren't even recruiting him at all. He had made the entire thing up. In high school, Hart was a decent football player, but had nowhere near the talent or the grades to be a Division I athlete. Because he was from a small town where people didn't have a clue what Division I talent looked like, he got away with lying for years that teams were recruiting him. And instead of admitting before signing day that it was all a lie, he held a huge ceremony to announce his fake commitment. and somehow none of the adults that surrounded him ever caught on. But the story doesn't stop there. Cal themselves got a hold of the school that same day, saying there was no scholarship that they had offered this kid. Coaches immediately drove to Hart's house and confronted him on the matter. Hart decided to keep the lie going. He told them that he had been duped by a middleman and claimed that this imposter set him up and took his money. They asked for a name, and on the spot, Kevin said, Kevin Riley? This just so happened to be the name of Cal's starting quarterback at the time. The police showed up the next day, looking to investigate this Riley person. But Kevin Hart couldn't provide any sort of evidence, and eventually he broke down and told them all it was a hoax. All in all, this was a wild story, and for Kevin Hart, he would later go on to play junior college football. Now, let's look at some mom-related recruiting stories.
I got both schools here. I'm gonna go Roll Tide Roll.
Ooh, Alabama. Now, might I ask you your reaction? And I'm only doing that because there was not a lot of joy here. Can I ask why?
I feel this LSU is a better place for him to be. LSU Tigers, #1. Go Tigers.
This was awkward. But what happened to Jacob Copeland was worse. On National Signing Day, Jacob Copeland committed to Florida, which clearly wasn't supported by his mother, who was wearing Tennessee and Alabama gear. On the surface, this looks like a petty move by the mother, and it clearly affected the son in the moments following the commitment.
So, Jacob, you're going to Florida. Who just got up and left there and to your right? Who got up and left?
Oh, that was my mom.
And why did she walk out and leave?
I don't know exactly why she walked out, but yeah.
A young man should never feel abandoned by his mom, but from his mother's perspective, apparently, her son had been more involved with gang members in the Florida area, and she wanted him to get away from those influences. So after trying to persuade her son to not go to Florida, and it didn't work, she was clearly upset by this. In the comments below, let me know, was she justified in her actions on that signing day? Now, as for another mother story, former 4-star recruit Alex Collins was deciding between Arkansas and Miami. His mother desperately wanted him to stay close to home and attend Miami, but Collins was pretty adamant that he was going to commit to Arkansas. So his mom, in a moment of desperation, hijacked his announcement ceremony literally moments before it started by stealing the commitment papers and then literally going into hiding. They looked and looked, and they ultimately couldn't track down his mother. But ultimately, Collins ended up tracking down his dad and had him sign the papers to go to Arkansas. His mother would come out of hiding and eventually hired an attorney to try and challenge the legitimacy of his dad signing off on Arkansas. It didn't work, and Collins became an excellent running back for them.
Spinning, still on his feet, powering through for a score!
Now, as you've heard in this video, there's been some pretty wild stories from the recruit and their family's perspective. But what about the actions that the schools themselves take to try and bring in recruits? It's no secret that top-level high school stars are convinced by coaches over extremely lavish and often controversial exploits. There was that time when Dorial Green Beckham was picked up at his high school via helicopter. Terrell Pryor was allegedly taken around by an escort sorority girl at Michigan. Herschel Walker and Eric Dickerson back in the day were seen in Trans Ams that were allegedly given to them by the schools recruiting them. The funny part was Dickerson allegedly received this Trans Am from Texas A&M, but he didn't even end up going there. The thing was, since it was a massive violation of NCAA rule, they couldn't get the car back because they really couldn't tell anyone about it. So allegedly, Dickerson got a free car from Texas A&M. And just as wild, Herschel Walker was such a prized recruit that Georgia just so happened to start a women's track and field team the year that they offered Herschel Walker, just so they could offer his sister as well to convince Herschel to choose them. Now, there are a million stories out there, both known and unknown when it comes to crazy recruiting stories, and feel free to leave any down below that I left out. But to finish this video off, Coach O, the former head coach at LSU, was recently on the Dan Patrick Show for an interview, and a particular question around the recruitment of Adrian Peterson came up. When Peterson was in high school, he was a national sensation. He was the top-ranked recruit in the country and was seen as a generational talent, and some of the recruiting efforts made to get him were substantial. And going back to Coach O, at the time, he was a member of the USC coaching staff, and they sent him to try and convince Adrian Peterson to attend USC.
I said, well, Adrian, what is the key to getting you here at USC? He says, Coach, well, Bob Stoops, my dad is incarcerated. Bob Stoops won't see him. Adrian said, Coach, my dad is be able to watch my games where he's at. Well, if I go to Oklahoma.
So because Adrian's number one reason that he was going to go to Oklahoma was because his dad was in Oklahoma, this is what Coach O tried to do to sway Adrian Peterson.
I tried to get the guy transferred to Los Angeles.
Wait, you tried to get Adrian's dad?
Yeah, tried.
Just insane. Imagine if Coach O had succeeded to move Peterson's dad to a California state prison. They would have had Lendell White, Adrian Peterson, and Reggie Bush in the same backfield. But instead, Peterson became one of the most dominant backs in college football history at Oklahoma.